Viewers of Birmaduu Media, I welcome you to our segment today. My name is Hambisa Belina, and I have two distinguished guests today. And unfortunately, we are going to talk about the ongoing atrocity in Oromia. And this atrocity has been going on recently for the last 4 years. Many of us have heard of stories. Many of us have probably experienced personal stories as well. Today we are going to relate a personal story about two elderly gentlemen named Temesgen and Tesso Duressa. They were brothers. 85 years old, Temesgen Duressa, and his older brother, 87 years old, Tesso Duressa. Two elderly people. They were in their homes, but the Ethiopian state-backed armed Amhara terror group called Fano broke into their homes and cold-bloodedly killed them. As you could imagine, these two gentlemen, they were not in harm's way. They were neither armed combatants nor were they of a military age. They were not innocent bystanders who were struck by an stray bullet. They were in their homes. They were targeted and killed in cold blood. And this is unfortunately just an iceberg of the genocide that is going on against the Oromo people. We have evidence of similar stories of young and old, of female and male, of urbanites and city dwellers, rural dwellers, as well as of Christians and Muslims. In general, we have of the Oromo being targeted just because they are Oromo. And today we have Kulani Temesgen Duressa, granddaughter of Temesgen Duressa, and Dr. Bekele Duressa, his son, with us. Now I welcome Dr. Bekele and Kulani to the set. Welcome, Dr. Bekele. Welcome, Kulani.
Thank you, Dr. Ambisa. Appreciate the opportunity to tell our stories to your audiences. And I know I have been on Birmaduu Media before, but it was under different circumstances. Really appreciate the opportunity to tell our story.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. First of all, my sincere condolences on your loss. I know how such loss stings and how heartbroken you are. Unfortunately, this is what is going on for many of our Oromo compatriots, and it's with heavy heart that I see you in such a circumstance. As I said, your dad, Dr. Bekele, and your uncle were 85 and 87-year-old elderly people, two innocent people who were in their homes. Would you please relate us the story?
Yeah, thank you. You're right. My dad was 85 years old, and then my uncle was 87 years old. And this issue uh, started in East Wallaga. It started about nearly 4 years ago now. It's been in the works for a long time, but most recently, since about 4 years ago, this armed militia group or terror group known as Fano have been infiltrating across the Nile River into the Oromia region, specifically in East Wallachia, and they have been attacking rural residents, farmers, and then displacing them, and most of them really get into towns as far as they can go from their areas of residence. And since it was just in rural areas, it didn't get much attention. There is no media coverage. Some of us in the diaspora tried our best to let the world know what is happening in that part of the world, but nobody seems to be listening. And the way they displace these farmers is literally unheard of, because I have lived long enough to see a conflict in Ethiopia that this is different. Um, if they see a person moving, they just shoot to kill if that person is at a distance. If they are close enough to that person, uh, they slaughter them with knife so that they don't waste bullets on them, and they take away their cows and sheep and whatever property the rural residents have. So people just left their property, their housing, and everything, and flocked into the towns. So um, the government, the Oromia regional government, um, special forces, did not assist the population at that time. It was ironic. A government that stands for its people were not doing anything. Uh, then ultimately, a couple of months ago, this changed. On November 18, uh, 2022, they start attacking Kiramu town. That is where my dad lived at the time. That wasn't expected because people thought they were just looting the rural areas, and then on the 18th they attacked the rural town, and there were some police, Oromia police force in the town. They killed about, from what I have heard, the statistics can always be difficult to accurately get the right number, but from what I have heard, they killed about 60 people of Oromia Special Forces, and probably about 20 civilians. And at that time, I reached out to my parents and I talked to my dad and my brother, who was also living with him. And I asked them how the situation was. And my brother specifically told me they were just fighting outside of our residence. And when they finally got out and they looked around, there were bullet holes inside the fence, and their home. But luckily, nothing went through, and they were okay. So I was happy about that at least, and I was sad about the people who died. And then on the 29th again, they came back. They did loot whatever they found on the 18th, and they took away whatever they wanted, and then they came back on November 29th. That is when my dad was killed. So the information that I got from my brother is, as soon as they start shooting at the edge of the town, the able-bodied people ran away to the forest, as fast as they can. And my uncle, who was 87 at the time, he said, "I'm not gonna run. I cannot do that because of his advanced age, of course." And my brother asked my dad to follow him, and he said, "I'm not gonna leave my brother here. We are elderly. Nothing happens to us. You guys go ahead and escape." And so they left them. They told them to lock the house from inside, and they ran away. So there was a fighting the whole day. Mind you, this fighting is between those Fano terror groups and the Oromia Special Forces, and there were a lot of fighting. And at the cover of the night, they came back. My brother came back to check on my parents, and as soon as he got into the home, he found out the gate to the house or to the home was broken in, and the door itself to the house was broken. And then once he got inside, he realized that was my dad and my uncle were killed with bullets wounds, and there was nothing he could do at that time. And the next morning, he tried to reach out to as many people and the relatives as possible. And the whole town now is um, being evacuated. I mean, when I say evacuated, they just ran away. There is nobody to evacuate the people, no transportation. They just need to run. So the next morning, getting as many people as he can get, they rushed into a place of burial, and they just put them there. And my brother has to run away with his family to the next town called Gita Ayana, and they had to. He has about 3 kids himself and his wife, and that is basically what happened. So this is a cold blood murder, as you rightfully put it. They could have simply come in and they looted whatever they needed, if that was their purpose. But I don't think that was their purpose. I think this is the plan they had to inflict harm to the society, to the Oromo people in general. I don't think they know my dad or my uncle. I don't think they know me personally. But what they know is these are Oromo people. They need to be eliminated so that they can get the land. Uh, and that is the only thing I can imagine. So that is what happened, Dr. Ambishan.
Thank you, Dr. Bekele. My condolences again. Kulani, we who were born and raised in Oromia and have lived under the terror in Ethiopia know, at least we understand what is going on. How did you receive the news? For you, it must have been a completely strange activity, something that you don't hear in the news, you don't expect to happen. How did you receive the news?
Yes, so I was away at college at the time, and growing up, I didn't really learn that much of the violence at a younger age, just because you know the Oromo conflict has been going on for so long, and it does become very violent. My parents didn't want to expose that to me at a young age. But the last couple of years, I have been learning about the Oromo struggle and what has happened to our people, and so I did know a bit of how it affects our people and the numbers, such as the 2016 Eritrea massacre and whatnot. But it never really it had never really impacted our family directly that I had known of. And so I'd been at college and I had woken up and my parents had told me to call them and they had told me that they'd passed. And at the time they had said it was, regional conflict, but I didn't hear the whole story until a couple days later. But it was definitely a different type of pain in the way that you understand that, sometimes you try to rationalize other deaths, sickness, old age, and whatnot. But when it's violence, when it's someone purposefully perpetrating it on an innocent human being, it really makes you question it. So it showed me a new side of the struggle and the things that happen back home and how heartless it can be. and just to know that this could happen to anybody. It's not just our story. It's a story of Oromos all across Oromia and the greater Ethiopia. Um, and so, to me, it was really just eye opening to understand how it can affect people, not just the people back home, but millions of diasporas across the world. And so, really, the singular deaths you may not know about back home impact so many people around the world.
Thank you. So just for the viewers, the pictures you see is first of Obbo Temesgen Duressa, an 85-year-old. He is Kulani's grandfather and Dr. Bekele's dad. And then this is Tesso Duressa, 87-year-old um, um, uncle and great uncle, respectively, for Dr. Bekele and Kulani. Unfortunately, even those of us who were born and raised in this horror, it's beyond our comprehension. Uh, when somebody is a combatant, fighting against a combatant is one thing. Even that, according to international law, there is an ethics involved. But targeting elderly people in their homes, breaking into their homes, and cold-bloodedly killing them is a different story. And when I think about this, I'm just wondering the degree of hatred that these people harbor. You must have been thinking over those things for God knows how now, Dr. Bekele. What do you say?
Yeah, you're right. Again, that's why earlier when I said we were used to violence in Ethiopia, but to my recollection, we've heard about what has happened during the Menelik uh, expansion to the south, um, and then there is a debate about that whether that kind of atrocity is even possible, and some of them arguing this is just a made-up fiction. It's not the reality. So this kind of thing. Let me start, Dr. Ambisa, by telling you what kind of a person my dad was.
Yes.
Um, I think I think every child would look at their father as a role model growing up, right? Um, so it is natural that people say good things about their dad, but just something relevant to this conflict. My dad, um, at a young age, um, he he had some farming that he was working on, and he does some trading also. He travels between Mulaga and the Gojang, and in doing that, he has close relationship with people from Gojang as well. When he goes over there, he brings some of the farmers from the Gojam area that would like to farm in Mulaga and make some money or some property, and some of them, when he brings them over, they either farm in local communities or they go farther and they collect coffee beans, and they get some money, and they either go back to Gojang, or some of them actually I know who remain in local areas, and they really became wealthy and things like that. So um, when I talk about these atrocities, some might even doubt that maybe somehow my dad was involved in the politics, and maybe that is the reason he was, and him and my uncle were killed. But the reality is, there was another incident in 2001 that many people are aware of uh, in that region. What has happened was during Tamrat Laine's premiership, they intentionally brought people from Gojam and settled in that area of Olaga. It has a sinister motive, of course. In hindsight, we are learning that. The idea was to expand their territory by kind of assimilating the population. At that time, nobody thought about that, so people accepted them with open arms. My dad, like I told you earlier, having that experience traveling to Gojam and the back, he was one of those people who helped them at that time. And even beyond that, during the time when we were children, school age children, I do remember people from as far as Wollo and the Tigray, the government bringing them in and settling them and saying it is because of drought they have to move them. And we helped them. And when I was in college, I went to Gambela to build houses. They called it Zamecha at that time. So we all accepted those people, and they were living peacefully. But in 2001, those people who were sent by Tamrat Laine instigated fighting between the Oromo who accepted them and who settled them in that area and the Amhara people. When that fighting got stronger, they were armed because then their intent was to expansion to begin with. And then the Oromia regional state got involved in that. This is in 2001. And the local population got angry, and there was a fighting, real fighting. And many of these Amaras were deported at that time. It was a hot issue. And my dad, who was just killed this year by last year by this same kind of group, he took in about 15 of them because he was concerned they might be killed by our people, by the Oromo. He hid them inside his house for a month or so until the thing was settled, and then they were free to leave after that. In 2011, I visited back home with my family, and these same people that he saved came out and they told myself, my wife, and kids, they were young at that time, but they told us, had it not been because of my dad, it would not be there now. So this was the kind of a person that my dad was. He had no problem with any group, and is an elderly person who is mediating between fighting parties all the time. And if there is a fight, even among the Oromos, he's the one who will be called to mediate between them. So this kind of killing, that is what makes it difficult to accept and to rationalize it. This is something you cannot rationalize. Um, and then at the age of 85, he's already frail. You know, this picture that we look at, this was taken when we visited about 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. So you can imagine how he looks now with this advanced age, and there was no explanation other than that pure hate terrorizing, so that the Oromo people would submit to their rule, to their supremacy, and to their demand for expansion, taking Gulaga because they are claiming Gulaga belongs to them. And again, I'm hoping we'll talk a little more, but that was not the only intention they have. This is not only to take Gulaga, but ultimately the entire country, and to reestablish the old glory, whatever that is, that they are dreaming about. So yeah, it is hard to understand.
Yeah, it's it's most unfortunate, and I am lost for words how to express these things. But they are going on. So, Kolani, I have a question for you. Um, Probably you have friends who are diverse, people from, kids who are of Ethiopian origin, and younger people your age, and also maybe you have friends from people from all over the world. Uh, how was relating this story to them? How did people receive it?
Yes. So um, originally, I had just told my roommates and my very close friends on campus because I needed, since I was on the other side of the country, I didn't really have any family or any support. Um, and I had told them, and I tried. Um, they were ethnic friends, and some of them had come from countries with ethnic violence, but not to the extent of the Oromos. To put it bluntly, they were horrified, especially when I told them, of the other similar attacks happening across Wodlaga, um, with the Oromos being slaughtered, having their necks cut and whatnot. And to them, it was just they couldn't understand. Even saying that we can't understand, despite the fact we come from the conflict in those people. For those who aren't Oromo, they truly just they were stunned. These are the things they see in movies and whatnot, and they might hear occasionally on the news. But I think to them to see someone they know like affected by it was definitely hard for them. And then after a couple of days, um, I had decided to put my grandpa and great uncle's story online on social media on Instagram because I wanted people to not to only have their story remembered, but also all these people, from my high school, elementary school, the Oromo teenagers I know. I wanted them to know the story so they really understand how it impacts people that they are friends with. Um, and so I'd written this lengthy paragraph about both my grandpa, my great uncle, and the Oromo conflict, and I put it on Instagram. I wasn't expecting much. Um, I was only expecting maybe 400, 500 people to see it. But despite the fact that so many people weren't Oromo that I had followed that I knew, they really, they sympathized and they began to understand what us as Oromos are going through, and to see how it is wrong and how it is. There's nothing good about it. There was nothing justifiable. And so after only a day of me putting it up, I had over 11,000 people reached in 24 hours, which to me was just amazing. I had many, Oromos, non-Oromos, other Ethiopian ethnicities, at like Kenyan people reaching out to me to say sorry, to learn more about the Oromo people. And as unfortunate as it is that it takes, deaths to waken to have these people's eyes opened, that we have to wait for, another massacre, another genocide to have people listen. It's empowering to see that there are people out there who do care about, you know, that care about the well-being of strangers they don't even know across the other side of the world. Um, and so I did have a really good support both of friends back home and friends at college who really wanted to learn more about their Romos, and how they could help. Um, and so that's really the reaction I got.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bekele, Kulani said something that struck with me, and it takes days, maybe sometimes, to awaken people. And I paraphrase what I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said. Uh, the task of liberating even the oppressors rests on the oppressed, something like that. It's through the struggle of the oppressed that the oppressors are also set free. Um, where do we go from here?
Yeah, that is um, a big question. Um, this is not new to the Oromo. Um, it has been happening since our conquest over 150 years ago, and it was isolated in many cases. And I do believe this is just my personal belief. I'm not a social scientist, by the way. I am a natural scientist. But what I'm feeling like is all of these deaths, we kind of normalized it. That's how I feel. Uh, uh, the things that you hear. First of all, before I get there, I should really tell you the kind of support that we received as a family from all walks of life, all Oromos that even didn't know me before, hearing the story and reaching out and supporting me in any way they can. I really appreciate that. I'm not saying they don't care. My community here in Northern California, the kind of support they showed me, and my friends from all over the world are reaching out, and like I said, people that I didn't even know. But what I'm saying is, it became normalized in our mind that when something like this, terrible things like this happen, we say, "Oh, it is so sad," and then what can we do? Uh, that is it, and then it will be forgotten. Of course, to the family, it will never be forgotten. For me, it is gonna be with me until the day I die, and the same for my family. Where do we go from here? Has to be the question for all of us. Um, but I do believe my expectation was when these kind of things happen. Probably the worst thing happened after my dad and then my uncle's death. We have seen the worst. The heads of young Oromo kids being cut, and they dancing to that, some as if it is some kind of a glory, and the burning corpses of the Oromo people on the street, and taking selfies, and skinning a young Oromo person while he's still alive and begging for his life, killing and burning a pregnant woman. Those are the things that you even it's difficult to say in the media like this, but it has to be said. We don't have a choice. So when all of these things happen, my hope was that the Oromo people would say enough is enough, and they get up and they fight the same way we fought when the previous administration was doing a lot of atrocities on our people. There was some movement, but that wasn't enough. So what we need to do is start asking ourselves questions. Where did we go wrong? What happened? The last revolution that we started that pushed out the oppressive government didn't materialize. Why did not it materialize is a question we have to ask ourselves. What have we learned from that? How can we use that for the next round of revolution that we have to take on? We have choices. The choice ahead of us is now either accept the slavery, accept the marginalization, and just live the way they want us to live, or stand up and fight. You know, There is nobody in this world who got the freedom by begging, or no other country in the world would come to your rescue and give you your freedom. It is a question all of us should ask ourselves. Uh, we can go into the discussion of what has happened and all that kind of thing. But one thing I would like to state, I've lived long enough to know what the Oromo politics is like. One thing that we don't seem to understand is how powerful we are as people if we knew how to use that power. But we failed so far. So we just have to mend, we have to repair all the wrongs, and we have to correct them and unite. I know we all sing about unity, we all talk about unity at every opportunity, but I think we seem to misunderstand what that unity means. I think I've said this before. A unity does not mean that having a single political organization and one leadership and one single religion and one single region, but it has to be a unity of purpose. That unity of purpose is to liberate our people so that we don't have to cry year after year, month after month, day after day. So that unity of purpose is to focus on the enemy, um, table any differences that we have among ourselves until the day of the liberation, and work together on the issues that unite us. That is the unity of purpose that I think we need to focus on. So we are not hopeless, of course. We have many areas that are in the workers, but I think it would require the effort of all of us to get to the finish line.
Thank you. I was thinking of this saying by, I think, Patrick Henry: "Give me liberty or give me death." Um, uh, the issue is, what we have seen is that death is coming. The coming of death is very evident. Even if we stay in our locked, closed doors, the killer is coming in. That's what happened here. Um, so the issue is we have to realize that we have a choice, as you said, and then make sure that we grab our liberty or die trying. Um, so Kulani, I'm sure you must have been thinking about these things. Not necessarily that you go back to Oromia and take up arms and struggle, but you must have been thinking about what needs to be done, because, as you said, uh, the coming of days really awakens us to take steps, to think how to solve issues, how to overcome our predicament, and so on. Um, what were the things that you must have thought, or you must have talked with your peers?
Yeah. So I, like my dad said, that sometimes this is a reoccurring pattern where, some event happens and we come together and we take our resources and we protest and we reach out, and then it kind of it dies down into the next one. And the biggest one I saw was in 2020 after Hachalu's death. There were protests all across the country, around the world. Our Oromo Youth Association, which had been disassembled for quite a while, we came back together. We had protests. We went to DC, Minnesota, and that was amazing to see all that power. You saw Oromos you'd never seen before. I saw Oromos that had disappeared from our community who came back because this really affected them because it was such a big event. And then it passed, and then it went died down, and now our Oya is not as functioning as it was at that time. And so I think the biggest thing that I think will help is just sustained effort, rather than touch and go. When we need it, let's bring the resources. I feel that we have, to me personally, I think we're in a unique situation where not only do we have diaspora all across the country outside of Oromia who can help, that aren't under the constant surveillance of the Ethiopian government. But we also have this technology, and how powerful. And I saw how powerful it was when 11,000 people read the story of my grandpa in under 24 hours, and these are people around the globe. And it could have gotten further if it had to. And so I think combining that, like the size of the diaspora and this technology, and just making sure that we sustain our efforts, and that we don't just let it come when another massacre happens and then we're like, okay, we're safe now. But we're not, because if we were actually safe, we wouldn't have to anticipate the next one. We wouldn't have to worry about another one. We should be at a point where we understand that our people have been liberated and whatnot. And I think another thing is just as we were talking about earlier with the diaspora kids who didn't grow up back home versus the elders and their parents who did grow back home. There's sometimes a disconnect in the experiences. We hear about the experiences versus those above us who went through the experiences. But then at the same time, I feel like with the youth that I've met across this country and online on social media, their Oromumas, just as strong, if not stronger, than some of the Oromos who fled the country. And they are, equally as passionate about liberating Oromos and freeing us, and Blusuma. And so really just like bridging that gap between the elders and the Oromo diaspora youth, because we have the Oromo Keros and Keres back home, but we also have youth outside the country who are just as willing to help. And so really just sustaining our efforts, utilizing all these resources that we are gratefully given as diaspora living in a country like America, and then just making sure that not Takuma, not only in terms of your RC ballet or like Muslim or Christian, but also between our ages, and understanding that the youth have just as much to offer as the elders before them did as well.
Thank you so very much. So well said. Dr. Bekele, do you have maybe some closing remarks, and then I'll give Kulani the opportunity to recite her poem.
Yes, sure. So I guess my closing remark is this: to the Oromo people, um, we might think different in terms of strategy to liberate ourselves, but for most of us to see a free Oromo and a free Oromia, I think for most of us is our objective. Um, but today, people are suffering in East Wallaga and the Horogudu Wallaga region. And not only is there actually in North Shawa and southeastern part of Oromia and Guji zone and the Borana zones, people are suffering. Um, the the scapegoat that they are using is this suffering comes from the what they call shane, whatever that means. I believe it is in reference to the Oromo Liberation Army. Uh, Oromos and the non-Oromos should understand one thing: the Oromo Liberation Army, to our dissatisfaction, has been around for over 50 years, and they lived in Urlaga and in any other regions of Oromia. The Amhara people lived in those areas for as long as that. If the plan of the Oromo Liberation Army was to kill and eradicate those, why did they wait all those years and just the last 3 or 4 years they started killing? I think somebody should, even the Amhara people should think about that. They should ask themselves that question. It is a made up story. I mean, even one of their activists, I heard them say at one time, this killing in Wallaga was orchestrated by uh, the extremists in the Amhara themselves so that they can use that as a scapegoat for their sinister motive in terms of expanding their territory and whatever intentions they have to bring that old glory they've been talking about. So, specifically, the Oromo people also should ask themselves this question: why all of a sudden they turned that way? It didn't start like that. If you recall, a couple of years back, they had this made-up story about 5 or 6 university students from Western Oromia disappearing, and they were abducted by the Oromo Liberation Army. We know how that turned out. They have used so many excuses so that they can go into those regions, but their ultimate objective is they have this fear of Oromuma that is coming up. The first thing they started saying after the Kero revolution that brought about the change in that empire, they started saying the Kero are extremists themselves. That was the next thing that this guy Skinder is his name, I believe. That's the first thing. After they liberated him and literally pulled him out of prison, that is what he wrote. That is when it started. So I think we need to wake up. If we are hoping that the current government is an Oromo government, as some might want us to believe, then ask yourself this question. When they were claiming the Amaras were massacred in different parts of Wolega, the deputy prime minister, the Mokoni, got out and spoke about those things, and the regional office governors of the Amhara region spoke about those atrocities. Abiy himself spoke about those atrocities. But when all these atrocities happened in East Wolega, in Kiramu district, Yarte Jardaga, and Gutin, in Gutin about 70 or 80 people was massacred. Where are the Oromo regional government people that are quote unquote leading the country? Did they say a single word about what is happening to the Oromo people? If they are Oromo and they stand for Oromo, and then in doing so they just govern the entire Ethiopia, why didn't even say a single word about this massacre? That is a question every Oromo should ask yourself. You might think, well, it is in Istwalaga, why should I care? But just wait and see. It will come to you. It will be your parents next time. I hope it doesn't get to that point. I hope you will wake up, smell the coffee, and do what needs to be done so that our people in other areas would not go through this heartbreak again. I think that is my message. I think to every Oromo, specifically Oromo organization, leave aside your ego. It's not going to take you anywhere. We have seen it year after year, blaming each other, pointing fingers to each other, not knowing some of those fingers are pointing to us. Ask yourself a question: what would be best for us? To work with my Oromo brother who happens to think differently and get the freedom for our people, or just fight against each other and lose everything? That is a question that we need to ask ourselves. I think the Oromo elites have to talk. We've been fighting among each other for many years. Dr. Ambisa, you know, I have tried my best in that area to bring people together, even those who do not agree on certain issues. I will continue doing that, but we have to talk. We have to talk what should we do in the future so that another Oromo family, another Oromo community do not have to suffer like that. Last one in my messages. If we fail this time, I think it's gonna be more than the 150 years that we suffered before. It will be the eradication of the idea of Oromo and the Oromoma itself. I don't think we want to allow that to happen. We have the means, we just have to use it to liberate ourselves. So, thank you, Dr. Musa.
Thank you, Dr. Bekele. Maybe one area which I forgot to mention is the international community. We live, work among diverse people. We live in a very diverse community, and we also know that the um, international players or the role of the international community is so important, because we know the Ethiopian government, however oppressive it is, wouldn't be able to exist without the financial backing and diplomatic backing of the international community. And what we have seen over the last 4 years, what we did see in Oromia, what we did see in Benishangul Gumuz, what we did see in Tigray, um, is very evident unless these issues are properly handled, and probably an end is put to this madness that is going on by this expansionist Amhara state and Fano. The fate of the Ethiopian empire would be like that of maybe Rwanda, like that of what happened elsewhere, the atrocities that is going to happen, the civil war. And in my opinion, over the last 5 years, the Oromo have been so much tested. They were put to fire on every side. They were poked to elicit them, poked to apprise them for raising their arms and killing their neighbors. And the Oromo has successfully um, uh, maybe uh, uh, fought against this instigation, but every patience has a limit. Once the cup overflows, then it would be very tough to stop it. So, if you care to speak to this area and Kulani as well, probably this would be the last one.
Right. Yeah, this is something that I said in a different setting. If this issue that is happening in Oromia in particular and Ethiopia in general is not handled properly, I have said it before and I'll say it again because it would make what happened in Rwanda a child's play. The reason being, look at the population of that country and look at how people are interwoven in terms of how they live. Look at the possibilities that most of these different groups are armed now. And I fear that, and I hope that is not going to happen. The international community has been deaf to all of these issues. It doesn't mean they don't know. They truly know more than you and me um, what is happening in that country. But what they are looking at is a relative peace. Unfortunately, international community looks at the power that you have. Are you powerful enough to seek their attention? If they don't see that, if they don't feel that, they're not going to help you. I mean, during the protest, we have shown them our kids that were killed on the street by the then military, um, and then they saw the pictures. They did very little for us until they realized that this is not going to be uh, uh, to
Justice.
slow down, and this is irreversible, and they started talking. So it is up to us. The peace does not come because somebody wants peace. Oromo by nature are peace-loving people. We know that. Everybody should knows that. Um, I'll give you an example. During the Cairo Revolution, when the TPLF leaders were doing all these atrocities inside Oromia, I have never heard a single Tigray living in Oromia being attacked. That by itself is enough. And before that, not a single Amhara has been attacked for being an Amhara inside Oromia. That is why an Oromo, they say an Oromo has this embracing culture. However, what we have to know is we have to know whom to embrace. You don't want to embrace a snake. You don't want to embrace a hyena who is here to kill you, who is here to murder you. So I think the Oromo people have to understand that, yeah, diplomacy is great, especially people in diaspora. We should do our best to let the world know what they already know. We have to continue our struggle in that arena. But one thing we should know is it is only our strength on the ground that will catch their attention so that they can do their level best to resolve this peacefully. That is my thinking at this time.
Thank you so much. Kulani, do you have any lasting remark or last remark, or you would go to your poem? You're on mute.
My apologies. Really just echoing everything that my father said, and that, you know, if we don't stop it while we can, who knows? Who can imagine what's really going to happen later? Yeah.
Thank you. So I thank you both, and again my sincere condolences. And as a final act, Kulani, would you please share your poem with us?
Yes. Just for context, this was a poem I wrote for the Northern California Oromo protests that we had about Oromos and their history with their struggle. I was told the empire came with their nigus of fame. Our land they claimed as they burned our homes aflame. They said, "This is your God," and replaced the Oda with the cross. "This is your king," and the Gada Kalacha was lost. "These are your words," and suddenly my ancestors spoke a tongue foreign to their own, an alphabet and culture whose taste was unknown. "This is who you are, Gala," a 5-letter word which made us less than human, second-class animals and evil until proven. That is the dark past of a country which espouses one love while dividing its citizens, promotes patriotism while ignoring the state it's in, whose leader plants trees while the seeds of the next generation are slaughtered and buried in the same ground they keep fertile for their schemes. Because any liberation is a deadly inspiration to an oppressive nation that has no hesitation to kill its population in its pursuit for domination. They say that history will repeat, but this is a story whose occurrence we must defeat, because how many more generations will death meet? Kalesa minele karkafi harma mure, hara mormakenya muran, boru mal murani. There will be no Bilasuma if we don't reach Sokuma. It is in our unity and our shared dreams of freedom that we may see a better tomorrow. We must not let the story of Wulaga become the tale of all Oromia. We cannot let the lives of my grandfather Temesgen, my great-uncle Tesso, and every Oromo killed before them become the fate of those after them. So when they ask, Oromo Jurtu, let your voice be heard. When they wonder where we are, let your presence be seen. And when they ask what you are, tell them that you are Oromo, that you are Borona and you are Barantu, that your blood is shared with kings and warriors, that your native tongue holds tales and stories passed down generations, that your ufata ada is worn as a symbol of pride and a preserver of history, and that your Oromuma will never stop existing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kulani. Thank you, Dr. Bekele. Thank you, Kulani. I know these things are, it's really painful to relive and to retell the story. But as you guys have said, telling the story is important. Putting faces to the atrocities that are being committed against our people is very important. And also the way Obbo Temesgen and Obbo Tesso live is through your stories, through you relating and telling their stories to us, to everybody. And I thank you again for your time and for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Dr. Mbisa, for having us again, and thank you for being a voice for the voiceless. Appreciate what you do for our people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, boss. And I hope to see you again in a better circumstance than this one. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right. God bless you. Thank you so much. Viewers of Birmaduu Media, I thank you again. As I said at the onset of this broadcast, these stories we tell are stories we have in common, all of us, regardless of the region where we live, the religion we follow, our gender, who you are. Since we are Oromo, the sons and daughters of Oromo, we face the same issue. And so, as eloquently said by Kulani and Dr. Bekele, it is time for us to rise up and to unite and put to this madness to an end to this madness. Thank you again very much, and I'll see you next time.